Okay. So let's take both of those. Let's start with Simmons. I had an argument with our mutual friend, Mr. Rose, here this morning on SportsCenter. He keeps calling that Ben Simmons' inability to shoot a weakness in his game. To me, it is not a weakness. It is a fatal flaw. There are certain things you can get away with not being able to do in basketball. A complete inability to take a shot in a game when you have the ball in your hands all the time is much more than a weakness. What do you think of that?
Especially in today's game. So I think it is fatal, and I think it's even more of a problem for the Sixers. And this is me sitting here going, they could still win the East. Okay, I can't wait to see this team play. I'm still not sure what's going to happen, but it looks really good. But to pair him with Embiid is something I've always said. Like, unfortunately, they're actually like the worst combo fit for each other. You have the best traditional big man that we have in the NBA in Embiid, and you have Simmons, who, despite not even threatening to take a shot, forget make him. You don't even have to defend him. You don't have to go out and challenge any of those shots. And that he can still be this dominant in some playoff games. Now, it's all over the place. It's a total roller coaster when you look at Simmons' whole thing. I just don't know where he's at with really wanting to be a shooter and putting in the work versus having somebody tell a broadcaster. Because every Sixers game, I hear the same thing. Like, oh, he's putting in so much work. He's doing this, he's doing that. And be like, man, he doesn't even pretend to take that shot. And I don't know why anyone would assume that at year 5, he's actually going to be just average from out there.
So here's a couple of things. Look at Markelle Fultz and what ended up happening to him as a #1 pick. Look what happened with Ben Simmons. At some point, we got to look at Brett Brown and his coaching staff and talk about their player development. You have one guy who's basically you took and he's hanging on by a thread to be in the league. And then you have Ben Simmons, the opposite end of the spectrum, a guy you just gave a maximum deal that can't take a shot outside of the paint.
Here's the thing. There were two different kinds of really good players in the NBA. I'm not in any way suggesting Ben Simmons isn't that. Obviously he is. He's an all-star.
But he's different, though.
You have to pay him.
It's a weird thing with him.
You're not going to win with him in the playoffs. He is not going to be the reason you win playoff games. There were two kinds of great players. There were guys who put up a lot of numbers and you can play well and win games in the regular season. Then there were guys who are the reason you win playoff games.
Correct.
And he doesn't show any sign of ever being that kind of player.
I agree with you. So this is where coaching comes in. When Mike D'Antoni gets the job in Houston, people think he's crazy when he wants to put the ball in James Harden's hand. It works out. For Ben Simmons, the reason why they have him at point guard is because he can't shoot, to protect all of the other weaknesses in his game. So now as a player, you got to protect me by eventually being able to make a shot. And he hasn't done it just yet.
No, it's a great point, because when you watch him off the ball, you're like, okay, there's no point. Like, now we can defend 4, okay? There's been this concept, theory, however you want to phrase it, around the NBA now for a little while. As special as Embiid is, and he is, like, I feel like certain nights when I watch him, I go, I don't know anyone can stop him in this league. And Simmons, again, has these peak playoff games where you go, if you could just be like this more consistently. But when they did their rebuild, they did it in such a vicious, non-apologetic way. Jalen can speak to this more than I can, but there's just people that feel like these two dudes came up as talented as they were, but there was never an adult in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these habits, whether it's Embiid being tired at the end of every game and feeling like he's out of shape, maybe it's the injury stuff with him, or Simmons not understanding what kind of work needs to be put in to just, him taking a couple shots and just showing it as a weapon would be something that defenses would respect.
So let's put it on the table here, Mr. Rostradamus. Mm-hmm. The combination of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, will they win a championship playing together?
Not if Ben Simmons can't make a shot outside of the paint. The answer has to be no. And Ryan just alluded to something you and I talked about all year. Look at the geometry of the floor. When Embiid is at his best, it's left block 12 feet away, live dribble with his back to the basket. That's not what's best for Ben Simmons in the half court. He's now on the baseline in the dunk spot where people can now double and triple team Embiid. So if they were building the team around Ben, say like Milwaukee did for the Greek Freak, where they surrounded him with shooting, that's when he could be at his maximum. But to answer your question, no, until that actually takes place.
There's so many possessions where I go, look how good Simmons is on the block here. But then now you're taking Embiid and having him face up, and then he falls in love with the threes at times. So it's as talented as they are, and I'm not going to sit here and say they can't win the East, because they still could figure this thing out. They're going to have so much size out there when everybody else is going small, so I can't wait to see how that works. But those two guys closing a game, you see it get clogged offensively.
But one of the quiet things that Philly did is they brought in Josh Richardson to actually take some pressure off of Ben as the quote-unquote point guard, who's actually a lockdown defender. Before, they would play like a J.J. Redick, who was a knockdown shooter.
Yeah.
Now, if you notice, they have somebody that's going to be a little more traditional guarding his spot, as well as trying to
Should you have to
initiate
do that
offense.
with a guy who just gave a max contract to?
Well, you got to play towards his weaknesses
And you
while
gotta
building
pay him.
around his strengths.
Anyway. I
And you
understand.
got to pay him. He's a perennial all-star.
Okay. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports, highlights, and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.